I call this meeting in order. Start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, can get an approval of the agenda, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as given.
Okay.
I would like to, do we have to approve the consent agenda? I would like to remove an item from the consent agenda to vote on separately, the superintendent's contract.
Okay. Anybody have any issues with pulling the superintendent contract from the consent agenda? Okay. That will result in us, at the very bottom of the agenda, we do have executive session, so that will
We'll come back in and vote
go
on
into
it
that.
after that.
Okay. All those in favor of the agenda as changed, amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Agenda is approved. Public comment. No, thanks. No? Okay. Board member comments. We're going to change it up to, we're going to start to my left with Mr. Whiteman.
Okay, first thing is, I just lost my cheat sheet for notes that I was going to say, oh well, I'll have to wing it. But in any case, not for this part, it's for the rest of the meeting. We all attended, of course, graduation, and have it go, let's see, this way. And that worked out really fine for me because everyone cooperated. Diploma, or no, handshake and diploma, no, whatever.
We need a video for that.
That's right. But it worked really well. It was really fun to be able to do that. Always fun to hand a diploma to a student and wish them the best in the rest of their life with all of less than 5 seconds to be able to say it and all that sort of stuff. But it's still fun. And of course, a couple of the kids, you actually know them a little bit, and so you try to add another extra word or two for them. But in any case, that's fun. And watching how the kids react, both to you, each one of you, and as well as myself, and how they come up, and some of them are just so dazed, and some of them are at the same time kind of stuff because they want to show off, and it's just really fun. Anyway, that was great. So you can all comment on that for yourselves. But also, a whole bunch of scholarship stuff was done, and I did attend the scholarship awards night, ceremony night, and watch the kids get those scholarship awards, senior awards night, I guess is what it's called. Watch those kids doing that. And actually, I had to stand up there and do a little bit of presentation, except I didn't have to talk. But I had to stand because some other folks needed my body there, I guess. I don't really like normally being the person talking. In any event, that was also very, very rewarding because of the kids just, we're helping kids personally in this case. And I'm involved in several different scholarship organizations and stuff and whatever. So that was really fun. Outside of that, it's the end of the school year. The Builders Club had their final meeting of the year, and they hosted the Kiwanis Club, who are their sponsors, and there were 9 Kiwanis members present, which was really nice because the kids, so that you all understand this, I deliberately get myself in trouble in the parliamentary procedure part of the meeting when the kids are running a meeting in front of the Kiwanis members. And I do that on purpose in order for them to both shut me up, punish me, and they make me hide behind the curtain over there for a period of time, or sometimes they put a bag on my head. But this means I can't help them, and they have to run the rest of the meeting themselves. And that's tricky for them, but it's really good because they rise to the occasion and they actually do it and successfully finish off the meeting with all the things that they're supposed to do. And there are, of course, some tricks involved in that, as well as at the end they also have to let me come back in so that I'm not completely left out. And they're following parliamentary procedure doing that. And I would certainly encourage any of you to come to see that next year because it is fun. Anyway, that's my report.
Well, I certainly want to follow up on what Art said. I think that bag idea has a future.
Yeah, it does.
I've been, part of my activity is on the agenda item we'll be discussing in the course of the meeting. Other than that, I have been a little active on the scholarship front. St. Hugh has a very obscure scholarship, 3 of them, worth $1,000 each. And this year, we're still in the process of giving it out. I don't know who the end winner is. But in the future, I want to do more toward getting that on the regular list of scholarships that we award at the proper time. And I participated in graduation with everyone else. And this is a ritual that means a lot to me because I go back a long way with graduations. I used to herd PhDs. I had a gold baton at the University of Washington. And herding them was always a privilege and a pleasure. And it always, when they play the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, it just, that's like a hymn to me. And it's wonderful to see these younger kids who I have not had any hand in educating. I never taught except for some student teaching in a high school. It's wonderful to see them, as Art says, launching out. Naive, happy, but many of them already accomplished. And it is just a great refresher to me. It's a kind of a vote for the future. And I just love seeing that happen, and it's a great honor to be part of it.
Well, a few of us got to attend a senior kind of round meeting with a couple of chosen seniors. I thought it was a good sit down and just getting their feedback about their school experience.
Yeah.
And they had some really good insight that was very valuable, and I think we had a really good discussion. On a personal note, today was attending my final assembly as a parent at Belfair Elementary. And that was kind of weird, thinking about how long we've been there. But it was really cool to see the number of, they give out awards for each grade, whether it's athletics, academics, attendance, and the number of kids who are getting these awards it seems like it gets bigger and bigger and bigger every year. So it's nice to see going forward.
Okay, well, as Craig said, the meeting with the group of seniors, I think there were maybe 12 of them there, maybe more. They were very well spoken, very mature, and our goal was to find out how their high school experience was, if there's anything we could change, if we could add to or take away from, or all in all, the comments were very positive. They felt that they had gotten all of the academics that they needed to get where they wanted to go. Made a couple of suggestions about some classes that we could add. They talked about the environment in the high school as being a very positive environment, very inclusive, that kids were not left out, that they went out of their way to be good friends to the lower classmen as they came on board. And I just felt like it was a really positive experience, and I took all kinds of notes and left them home, but I'm going to give them to Dana, and who was also there. And I feel like that is something that we could do every year.
Hear, hear.
And one of their issues, not issue, but one of their recommendations was to find a way to recognize all students. Mm-hmm. Not just the 2 students of the semester or whatever, but find a way to put somebody's name up there for something all the time. They do it at the elementary schools, and I think it would be important to continue that through middle school and high school. It was important to them enough so to mention it, but I was really impressed with that group of kids. It was awesome, and graduation was interesting. Lots of adventures there, and I'm looking forward to graduation in the stadium next year. So that's all I have.
That will be exciting. So the scholarship, and they're giving us the award. I got to do that last year. I didn't make it this year, but I think last year I forgot to thank our community that give to that, and some of their the businesses out there. Most of the money that comes in, there's a thrift store that most of that money they give it to scholarship. They don't actually take it for themselves. So I thank our community for that. And the graduation was very eventful, and thank you to Mr. Patty here and to Bo who ran out, and the first responders that were waving,
Here, here.
waving to the woman there and keeping her cool, it was very well done, and everybody was very supportive. And I saw that her family posted something to thank the community and the school and everybody about that. So that was really exciting. And I mess up names, so I'm not going to say his name, but the last senior speaker, that he was just so bubbly and bright, and he got up and said his piece, and fashion designer and his family, and I promised I wasn't going to cry this time, and there it went. I didn't even have tissues, and he was just wonderful. They were all wonderful, but he was a show, he was just out there, and I think that's his personality. So I really enjoyed myself and being up there and seeing that. So
I forgot the time we have spent with talking to seniors and students in general in those little roundtables, and I think we really owe a debt of gratitude to Spencer
yeah,
for organizing those. And it feels, one of the things it's enabled me to do is if people ask questions about what kids are doing or feeling, I can say with some authority, well, I have listened to several groups over the course of the year, and here are the kind of things that I'm hearing. And if you've heard something else, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought those were a great democratizer, because I think it lets kids know that their voice makes a difference in how they're governed. And it's not direct democracy, of course, but it is participation in something that pretends to be representative of the students and has their best welfare at heart. And I thought it was very informative to see what kids are afraid of and what they're confident about. And I was very reassured, I've been reassured a couple of times, that they feel pretty safe at the school.
yeah.
And I think that's an achievement, given the environment in which we're living. But I thought that was throughout the year, I think that's been a very good idea that Spencer's introduced, and we should continue.
All right. Moving on, well, I see we have no student board members here. So we'll move on to item number 2, which is the consent items, and I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I move to approve the consent agenda with the removal of the superintendent's contract for vote later.
Any discussion?
I have several things,
Okay.
and I did find my cheat sheet.
Oh, good.
All right.
Most of them are the policy things. I had some mostly comments I wanted to make. I don't have any issues with it particularly, but I want to make some comments that to me were pertinent. Let's see, one of them was policy 6100. That's the revenues from local, state, federal sources policy. This one was just, it's an oddity on page 2. So I guess, Ashley, this would be a pertinent thing to pay attention to, but it's unfinished. The sentence that was added in doesn't say, well, it says,
What line?
submit to the levy to the, and it ends.
Where were you looking, what line?
This was page 2 of the policy, and it's line 40, line 3 on page 2. It's in red,
So you have to lean back.
and it says, submit the levy to the,
And then come to
and then everything else is blotted out. And I presume it means to the state, or to the ballot, or to the public, but it doesn't say. And I think that's probably an error from the state's point of view, just a typo kind of a thing, that they missed a word or something, but just saying, let you know, it's not in there. So that's just a errata on that particular item.
Oh, it's to submit it to the voters.
To the voters,
So
yeah.
Can you make that,
So that line strike isn't supposed to be
Oh, it is.
struck?
it's
There's-
just where after the there, where the starts
Oh.
with going, it should say voters, period.
Oh, voters period, okay.
Yeah, okay, voters. Yeah, I didn't even pick that word out.
Thank you for catching that, Art.
Yeah. So that's just errata. The next one was policy 5281, which is a disciplinary action and discharge. And this one was where was it again?
Yeah,
Um,
related to employees.
Yeah, let's see, where did I put my notes here?
Misconduct is what you were looking for, probably. It says
Let me get it
miscount.
on here in a second. It talks about contacting the CPS registry. Oh, okay, well, it's the sexual inappropriateness and that sort of stuff with students.
Mhm.
And it just brought up a thing to mind. I don't have a problem with what we're trying to say here, but it brought up. I get that it's trying to tell us, it's trying to make us have a policy that is so that we don't automatically recommend a person who is a child sexual predator to some other district. What I would like to see is something a little bit more than this. This, to me, wasn't enough. It makes it so that we're restricted from, well, doing that, which is a good thing, I think. On the other hand, where do you draw the line for when it's not clear? When somebody's been accused, but it's not been proven in court.
Mhm.
Not that we need to give them a recommendation, but we could certainly, I mean, and the policy does allow us to, yes, give them our, whatever it said, we can still send them our records for their
Mhm.
personnel employment kind of stuff like that, and that's appropriate. But at what point, and I'm worried about, at what point, because people are always overreaching when they make rules and stuff, or, finding
Mhm.
the gray areas and loopholes. And I'm just a little bit concerned that, the state could come up with, whoever writes these things, could come up with something a little bit more inclusive or better that would help prevent some of that overreaching from happening. I'm not wanting to protect any sexual predator by any stretch. If I were guilty of that, I hope he would shoot me, kind of stuff. But I've spent an entire lifetime, my career, in having to be trained about and deal with that because I'm a man working with girls. And so I'm very sensitive to, that, at least from that end, but it can work the other ways as well. In any event, I do know, there are people that falsely accuse.
Mhm.
And if a teacher is, for example, falsely accused, how would we know unless, if there's a conviction? Okay, it doesn't matter whether we know or not. We can follow that in this policy
Mhm.
very clearly. The conviction is the enough. But when there's not something like that, it's not like I want to go and give the person a recommendation to go to another school or something like that. I want to have something, I would like to see something more that from the state that helps us to guide us for when that, and I'm calling it overreach and it may be underreach, but for that kind of thing to not happen. Does that make sense?
No, I think I know what you're talking about, and like you said, that would be a very delicate line.
Yes, very delicate line.
Because people do get over-reported and they do get under-reported.
Right.
I do know that years ago, when I was still a student, because of my family's involvement in public education in our state, I became aware of several instances where districts around our state at that point in time, which we all know is a while ago, districts had chosen to write recommendations for people who were district employees if they would go to another district so that they wouldn't have to pursue the charges against the student. And so that person might have gone to 2 or 3 other districts before there was finally a stop put to their behavior. And so I don't know how we fix that,
Right.
other than people who are in positions of authority districts need to be sure to act with ethics and with the idea of protecting our students. But we certainly wouldn't want a policy that would allow us to share every single thing that's ever been said about a staff member with another district, because some of those things might not be true. So it's very tricky, but all this change does is really make sure that we know we can't write recommendations for people when we know
Right.
that this is the case.
And I support it. I'm in favor of this stuff, this
Yeah.
direction we're going. I do have an additional comment or something, and this may be helpful down the road in a different way, in a different set of policies somehow. I had a couple of incidences in my time. One is a Girl Scout incident, one here is a school district incident before I was on the board. The Girl Scout incident is something that periodically will happen, not very often. But I have very strict rules. I don't do one-on-one with kids, and that's been true since I worked for the Girl Scouts. And I know that, and I believe in that. Always have someone else present. But there are times, because I'm living at the camp, and kids and adults who are volunteers, they don't always follow rules. And I have run across an individual girl who is, in her mind, lost. I'm not going to leave her alone. I'm going to get her back. It's, you know, I don't have, back then especially, I didn't have, you know, cell phones, none. Even now the cell phones don't work, to be able to get help. I'm going to bring her back to where something's going on, or, you know, to where there's more people present. And so that's you know, that's a choice I make and a chance I take. That girl could decide to accuse me of something inappropriate. I know for myself, I'm not going to do anything inappropriate, but I'm taking a risk because of that. You know, the allegation becomes almost as bad as, well, it's not as bad as actually doing something wrong, but it becomes as big an issue. The other one, the school district one, was one that here's where maybe some, not a policy change, but some recommendations can come into play. I was playing basketball at the old Hawkins Middle School gym in the evening. It was a Wednesday evening. This is many, many years ago, long before I was on the school board, probably in the 1990s. I could name you the kid, as a matter of fact. It was a boy, but I'm not gonna. That isn't important. The kid is now grown up and long gone. The kid lived over at Toonerville, where the fire just was recently. I didn't know the kid, but a school bus came back from some field trip or probably a sports game or whatever. All these kids get off the bus, and here we have adult basketball going on Wednesday night. And we're playing ball, and all these kids are coming in there, and of course we don't play with the kids or whatever. We're not supposed to, and I suspect this one particular kid probably did play or whatever. You know, certainly got a ball out and shot hoops while he was waiting. The kids finally all trickled out. The coaches left, whatever, but this one kid was left there. Now, it was my practice, because I live far enough away that I'm not going to drive home all sweaty and whatever. I'm going to take a shower there. So I was taking a shower, and I'm all done, and I was the person, and I just, you know, oftentimes still, I'm the guy that closes up everything, making sure the doors are locked and all that sort of stuff. And here I am, and here's this kid still there. And it's dark out now at night. This is after 9 o'clock easily. And so I asked, and he's a middle school kid, you know, what's going on? You know, well, my parents are supposed to pick me up. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to leave this premises until his parents pick him up. He's all by himself. Nobody's around. This is before cell phones. There was a payphone in this building, right over there. There was another payphone at the high school, too. It was what's now the middle school. Anyway, so I went to the payphone, and this is what I did after finding out, you know, his parent is not coming. He thought his parent was still coming, but they didn't show up. And I want to get home, too, but I'm not going to leave this kid alone. So I went to the payphone, and I called 911. And I said, there's this kid here, and I can't do anything, you know, I'm not going to, you know. Anyway, 911 was not helpful.
No.
What are they going to do? You know? And I said, I want to let you know then, so I'm going to call the principal of the school. And I did. Unfortunately, I didn't get it. This was Tom Mars, the principal. But he wasn't home, so I left a message on his phone machine. I am taking this kid by name home. I'm doing it. It's just him and I. And I'm going to call again as soon as I get a chance when I drop him off to let you know that I've done this. But I'm trying to leave a record for myself of what I have done. And that's the strategy. I called 911, let them know I've got the kid. He's in my custody at this point. So if someone calls saying, where's my kid? They can do some tracking. I want to be responsible rather than just go and do it and whatever. So that's bringing that story up to illustrate there's things that maybe we can add to our procedures.
We have expectations for our teachers, principals, whomever who takes students anywhere. If they take kids on any kind of a trip, they do not leave until the last student is picked up and off of these premises. That they are not dismissed. And if they do that, will result in disciplinary action. That's number one. Number two, if for any reason a staff member would find a need to take a student home because something like that happens and nobody can reach the kids, two of them need to do it. So that They're,
Right.
you know, they're witnesses. And so we do have some expectations. We have revised our field trip and other student supervision expectations and taught them to staff, because we do expect that they fully supervise kids at all times that when they're in our control, and that until they are picked up by parents or dropped off at the end of the day on a bus, they are with an adult. And if any of our district employees forget to follow that, they will have disciplinary action.
Right. I want to give you just a little follow-up there, and then I have a third little story that illustrates the same kind of thing in a little different way.
Can we keep it somewhat?
We'll try,
Okay.
although, this kid, I tried to have him call home. His parents were home, but they were asleep. So they didn't answer the phone. I wound up driving him home, and that's what happened. Of course, Tom Mars, later on, we talked and whatever. Now, the third story involves a school bus. I'm picking my daughter up where she gets dropped off. She's a youngster, and there's another girl getting off the bus there who was a little bit younger than my daughter, but who just lived down the road from where they got dropped off. I had, when I came to go pick her up before the bus arrived, noticed a really scruffy-looking character wandering around on the trail. There's a foot trail right nearby there that's a public foot trail in the Tahuya Forest. And I've seen a couple others like that before. There's a couple of them that I know from sight. They're regulars, and they're probably harmless. Those ones I don't worry about, except I just watch. Well, here was a brand new one, and he was doing some furtive stuff that I couldn't follow or whatever. Okay, this other girl who gets off the bus, while my daughter comes into the vehicle with me, is going to be walking home, quite visible down the road itself to her house. Actually, it's her grandparents' house. I went to begin to illustrate, cover your butt in a sense. I went to the school bus driver and said, okay, there's this strange person that I had just saw just before you arrived that I'm worried about. So what I'm going to do with this girl getting off the bus is I'm just going to shadow her in my vehicle. And I let her know that too. And I'm just going to drive behind her for a while until I see her get into her house. And I don't even know if her grandparents were home or not, but she got into the house. She didn't want me to do that. But I said, I'm doing that. You know, I have my daughter with me too, just to be sure you're safe. So that was the story. The bus driver, I'm sure, called it in. In fact, I asked her to call it in to let them know that there's this strange person out here that I don't know anything about, that I'm just protecting the kid. So there you have it. Okay,
Sure.
Done, Craig.
Thank you, Art. All right, is there any other discussion on the consent agenda? Okay.
Oh, yes, there is.
Oh.
Sorry. Policy, where was it now? Got to get back. 3205, line 40 to 43 on page 2.
Oh, that was
That's
the one I
sexual
thought I was talking
harassment.
about.
Let me get back to it.
What am I doing? Oh, I'm on a different page here. Something happened.
Nope, I got the wrong policy online. Oh,
Well, 3205 and 5281 are related in the
Yes.
provision that was
Okay, then
added.
I guess I'll just drop whatever comment I had.
Yeah, it's
Whatever. Yeah.
it's changes that align both policies.
Right, okay. We probably covered it anyway in some other way.
Okay.
I didn't have, oh, yes, I did. The Color Guard Club. I just noticed on the Color Guard Club thing, rifles, and I just wanted to be sure that these rifles are not shootable.
No.
It
They're,
doesn't say anything about that.
Color Guard, as they're planning to do this club, tends to use like a wood block. They're fakes. They don't even have a barrel, a real barrel.
Okay, so they're not real guns.
Yeah.
That's good, and I wish they would have said that, and I wouldn't have had to ask
We
the
have a
question.
couple at home that
Yeah.
we got through
Right, I
family
kind of guessed
dining.
that, but I
I've seen
wanted
them.
it spelled
Yeah.
out. And then finally, can you bring up the Solient Health contract for school psychologists? What is that all about? Are we short of school psychologists?
We're always short school psychologists. We contract to get them, so this is just so that we can keep one of the psychologists that we currently have who is on contract, who does a really good job. But the way that we write those contracts when we get them is then we're prohibited for several months to years from being able to hire the really good person we got under the contract.
Uh-huh.
And we would like to keep this one. So, and we always advertise to see if we can get enough people to, to apply to fill those positions. And when we can't get them to apply for a regular position, then we re-up the contract.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Call for the question?
Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Consent agenda passes. Item 3, WASDA Legislative Representative nomination. And the WASDA Legislative Representation position is a 2-year term that has formerly been held by Director Campbell. And do we have any nominations?
If you weren't so involved in the job you're already doing, I think you would make an excellent person.
I'd be open to accepting the
Well,
nomination.
it isn't that I don't like it, it's that I like it too much.
Mhm.
And I think it would be good to have someone else do it because it is a time consumer.
Mhm.
And since I know you were totally at leisure being a fire person, I thought your previous involvement, Craig, would make you an ideal person for this job anyway, and it would be good to have some new ideas. If something comes to me, don't worry, I'll get a hold of you. I'm glad that I'm on it now for this time because of the motion I hope you will pass this evening that I'll bring before the larger assembly about civic education. But I think your experience in politics and your general diplomatic character recommends you for his job.
Well, I would like to nominate Craig for this 2-year position, and John is welcome to be there. I mean, you can be there when this proposal comes before the General Assembly as well, so you can speak to it, so you're
Okay, well,
not
that's
out
great.
of the picture.
And by the way, anytime you need someone to scramble to go to Olympia or for some special thing like that, feel free to call.
Was there anybody else who would like to be nominated? No, that's a big deal.
We're all looking at you smiling, great.
Okay, well, I accept that nomination.
I second it, if we need that to do that.
Sure. Any discussion?
Yes, I'd just like to say that John has done an outstanding job as our
Absolutely.
ledge rep, and I realize how much time it has taken you and taken you away from your wife as well, and she reminded me of that. So, I just think that I want you to stay involved. I don't want you to subtract yourself totally, because you really do have a lot to offer, and you are a well-spoken individual in front of a large assembly. So stay on in that capacity.
Well, I'm honored and I thank you very much, and I will be most open to circumstances where I could be of help.
And I think Craig is open enough that would feel comfortable enough with you by asking questions and getting some feedback on
Absolutely.
everything. I think that would be really cool.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. And then for the We the People proposal, there was an amendment that the legislative committee made for them, and the wording that they recommended was not so much We the People, but it was for civics education, such as We the People.
Yeah.
Are we okay with that wording change?
I could say a few words about it. I talked to Jessica Vavris on this, and things happen to ideas when you take them to committee. First, I just did this for We the People because I knew that this is a federal program that hasn't been funded, and if it were funded, it would benefit all the districts in the state. But it is one particular, including ourselves, and our teachers, because then there would be money for their special training for anyone that wanted to go by this program. And we have at least used it as a model for some of our civics classes here. I think that what they're doing, they're afraid of recommending one particular proposal. So they're giving a push to civic education in general. I will work carefully with Craig during the year to come to see if there's something more specific, because I feel that I respect their concern for undue advocacy to one program. On the other hand, this is a nationally sponsored program, and I would like our kids and the kids of the state to gain some benefits from it. When we first started out, there was money available, and some of you may remember, I was passing out constitutions as though they were Gospels of John, you know, and I would like to see that kind of constitutional circulation go on, and it would be good if we had resources for that sort of thing. I certainly would have given them to the seniors, you know, that we talked about, that we talked to. And so that's basically what it's about. Committee, politics, larger view. We get something, it's a good beginning. I would go for it, and I will continue to press for it, something more specific in the future.
So as a board, are we comfortable, do we want to make a motion to take that back as a recommendation with the amended language?
Do we need a motion on that?
Yeah.
Okay, I move that we submit this proposal to the Legislative Assembly in September, the amended proposal.
Okay. Any discussion? I think we already did it.
Yeah.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Number 4, Phil Pugh concession certification of completion recommendation. The administration recommends that the Board of Directors approve Resolution 13-G-19 for the certification of completion of the Phil Pugh Stadium concessions. And in your packet, there's a letter for final acceptance as well as a resolution. So I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Discussion.
All seems to be in order with me. As I read it.
Very happy with the building. I mean, I
Mhm.
know over the sports seasons last, it
Yeah.
seemed to be a great addition to our campus.
Yep.
So, all right. All those in favor of approving Resolution 13-G-19 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, passes. All right, number 5, is that the
That's the administrative group.
Association of North Mason School Administrators.
Yes.
The bargaining agreement. The administration recommends that the Board of Directors approve the bargaining agreement for the Association of North Mason School Administrators for July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2022. And in your packet is also the collective bargaining agreement. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Discussion.
I would just like to thank our bargaining team, which is the superintendent and our director of finance, and whoever else was on our team for sticking
Carolyn.
to the, Carolyn, for sticking to the parameters that we gave you all in terms of coming to an agreement. So I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you.
I second that. Not an official second, but
Right.
a theoretical second.
Okay.
Figurative second. All right. All those in favor of approving the bargaining agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, passes. Number 6, public school employees contract. The administration recommends that the Board of Directors approves the PSE collective bargaining agreement for September 1, 2019 through August 31st, 2022 as presented. And just like before, that collective bargaining agreement is in your board packet. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Discussion.
Well, actually, the same comment I just made. Thank you very much.
And I didn't sit on that team, and they just
Okay.
came and reported to me, but Ashley and Carolyn and Amy and the rest of the team did a really good job in
Awesome.
sharing the needs and the position of the district, and in hearing the needs and the position of the bargaining unit, and finding an agreement that they could all live with. So, thank you guys.
That's great.
And I'd like to make the point that being a union person myself, that is the important thing. It's finding I think the best agreements are the ones where no one ever feels they won. So but both sides find fair.
Mhm.
So, all right. All those in favor of approving the PSE collective bargaining agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, contract is passed. Number 7, schedule a special board meeting to consider the grandstands bids. Administration recommends that the Board of Directors schedule a special meeting to determine if the bid is acceptable, and that the bidding is on June 21st, so I'm assuming you'd want a meeting shortly thereafter?
I would, as soon as thereafter as we can. We're opening bids at 2 p.m. on Friday, the 21st.
Okay.
And I would I think it's a little presumptuous to ask you to come in on a Friday evening, but certainly if we could get some of the board member, enough of a quorum to meet on Monday, that would be awesome, the 24th.
Could we not make a Friday evening? Is that
Let's,
a
let's
horrible?
Well,
have
we
a-
could do Friday, I don't care.
Let's do a, let's see if we can get a motion first
Well, we're,
to have a special meeting.
I
And then
mean, we have a
discuss.
special meeting.
Okay, discussion.
I
I'd be
just-
willing to give up all the news programs in favor of that.
I'm gone until the 26th.
Okay. So then it would have to be a time, you're gone,
Gone. So if the
It-
three of you
would have to be
would have to
available.
be available to meet.
And you're saying Friday is a possibility?
In the after probably 3, at 3.
Is there any work that you need to
Oh,
do to
Friday.
prepare everything to have to?
I've asked Ray if he can prepare a document that I can just write in the winner. So if we could do it that fast, we could do it that fast.
And then we can see the draft just before? You know, like, just have a small draft so that we can see, like, when we come into it, we're not just going, yeah, go ahead. You know, just like, we get to see.
Well, we did see that.
You've already seen
Oh,
the
that's right,
plans.
okay.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it's
okay.
just the dollar amount
Yeah.
that
Oh,
we're gonna
okay,
spend.
okay.
And
didn't know
who
you
we're
were
gonna, and who
redoing
we're gonna
something.
pay it to.
Okay.
No, it's just really,
Yeah.
we showed you already what they're going to do, so now it's who's offering us the best price
Okay.
Project.
Oh, okay.
for the
Okay.
project.
I thought there was a
Because
whole
remember,
new thing.
we're under the requirement to accept the lowest reasonable bid.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So,
Even though I will not be here, I would prefer if you guys could meet on the Monday. That way maybe that correspondence could get to us, so at least I could read it.
I would like to do that too, so that you have that opportunity.
Okay.
And then you can submit comments that at least I could share with
Yeah.
the rest of the board, at whomever can meet.
Well, you'd rather meet on Monday then, right?
I will not be here.
I need to know if you and Leanna
If
and
you
Art
will
can
be
meet on
available
on Monday, the
Oh, yeah,
24th.
sure.
Or
21st.
Tuesday.
I start jury duty that Monday, but
Okay.
I may not be called in. So if I have jury duty, I can't meet during the day, but if
Well-
not, I could.
And Laura, you get back in town on the 26th?
Yeah, Wednesday.
So we could schedule it for the 26th, because that way, if you can't be there
Well,
and
The night of the 24th.
the night of the 24th, you could
That's
do
the
it.
presidential debate. I'm just kidding. I can be here.
Yeah.
They
Yeah, if you
program
do
it
it-
into my,
You would be available, for instance, at 5:30 on the 24th.
Right.
It would be a really quick meeting.
It'll be a get in, read it, vote it up or down, and
Yeah.
go, and end the
Okay.
meeting.
Yeah,
So let's do that Monday at 5:30.
okay.
Okay.
John, can you do that?
Yeah, this is the 24th?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my appointments are in the morning. And what time would this be?
5:30.
5:30?
Leanna,
okay.
can you do that?
yeah. So
You
there'll be
won't-
3 of us, right?
Right.
Mhm.
It's the
Critical.
next thing. It's in my report. You're be the. No.
We'll get to you. Okay, so with that said, do we need to identify who will run the meeting, since both president and vice
Yes.
presiding officers? are
Who,
gone?
which of the three of them will
John?
run the
So
meeting?
being the immediate former president, do you want to preside over that meeting?
Why not?
Okay, so,
5:30,
all right.
yeah.
Okay.
So, for a meeting set June 24th at,
5:30.
what time are you guys looking at?
5:30?
5:30 PM for Director Campbell to preside over special meeting to accept or not accept the bids for the grandstands. So, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? All right. And
Okay.
it shall be.
Thank you. So the next thing on the agenda is the superintendent update, which we have the budget update, and Ashley will do that, and the teaching and learning update, and Lisa will be talking to you about our literacy adoption. And then after that, we'll talk capital projects and Feller, but just kind of give you a overall view of what's coming up. So Ashley's up first. Can you move?
Yeah.
Ashley was in a car accident on Saturday.
Oh,
What?
no.
I'm good. Just a little bit slower than
You should
normal.
really avoid hitting other vehicles.
I know, I really should. So my tour truck is out there, you guys can see it, because Dan has told me I cannot drive it, so. Our nice certified mechanic, who happens to be our transportation director, told me I have frame damage, so, yeah.
It's nice to have friends.
I know, exactly. I did, I called her first thing this morning.
We
I said,
made her
"Can you
call our
come
insurance
just-"
company and get a rental car.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got a rental car now.
Somebody
so.
hit you up here?
It was a 3-car collision on, technically on Highway 3, but going towards Old Belfair
Towards,
Highway.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Oh, okay.
stretch right there, but technically on the Highway 3 side.
Oh.
And I'd stopped to avoid hitting somebody and got taken out
Rear-ended.
by a truck.
So she's much more excited to talk about money.
Yeah.
I know,
let's
so
do
yeah,
that.
it was an eventful weekend to say the least. So, with that being said, okay, so other budgets, capital projects, it's just sort of sitting there for this last month. We didn't make any super large payments from the fund. Hopefully over the course of the summer, once everything starts getting approved, we're gonna start seeing that dwindle down. Debt service, we did make our debt service payment on June 1st, but since this report goes through May 31st, you're still seeing our higher dollar amount, but I made about $1.3 million in payment for our debt service. That we'll see reflected in next month's balance. ASB is sitting right around 392. It's probably going to end up closing this year around 380. There's not a whole lot of activity that we've seen through ASB recently. Transportation vehicle increased by a little over $6,000, and that was due to the payment that we received for the surplus buses. So that all was receipted. Enrollment, this is sort of an exciting time because now we can look and see what our average enrollment was for the year. Now that we have our June figures, so June with early graduation and such for some students, we were at 2,237 student FTE, which meant that for the year we averaged 2,248.7. We had budgeted at 2,229, so 2,229. So we were well over where we had originally budgeted for our student enrollment. So with that being said, that's where you see the increased revenues and then the increased expenditures because we received more money than for that increased enrollment. So that's what we have in for enrollment and our other funds. So now to take a closer look at our general fund, and we'll start with revenues. So right now, we're trending at about 8.79% as far as revenues to total fund balance. Our minimum fund balance is actually based upon expenditures, but our expenditures are over 8% as well, and this is where we're trending as far as year end. Our projected year-to-date revenues as far as what we've actually taken in is about 78.16%. At this point, last year we were at about 76%, so we are trending over, but again, with that increased enrollment, we would expect that. We still have technically 3 months as far as when this report was done, 3 full months left of our fiscal year to continue to collect revenues. State forests, our state forest revenue collection is starting to pick up, which is one of the things that I'm really excited about right now. I'm stalking it like a hawk as it gets posted at the end of every month. So we're at $105,166 collected year to date so far. The majority of that being within this last month. So with the nicer weather around, there's more trees being cut, more trees being sold. So we're starting to see an increase there. Now, with that being said, that's only our collection on the general fund side. We have an amount equal to that was collected and put into our debt service fund. And that's when we're going to be looking at doing that budget transfer for next budget year from debt service into capital projects to be able to do some capital work across the district. Second page, taking a deeper look at actual expenditures. So we're currently trending at 9.23% budgeted or actual expenditures to fund balance for end of year. So we're always keeping an eye on that, make sure it's over 8%. And so far it does look like we will be at that percent. Our year-to-date expenditures, we're currently at 81%. Last year at this time we were about 75%, so that increase, a lot of it's due to the negotiated salary and benefit increases that were over what had been budgeted for last year. as of right now, with us having finished negotiating with 2 out of the 3 groups that we're negotiating with, I'm fairly confident in saying that we're not going to see that type of a variance going into the budget next year, because we were able to accurately capture what we thought we were going to settle at with what we had budgeted. So that's going to be hugely helpful next year when it comes to the actual budget. So our salaries and benefits, to date, we're currently sitting about 83%. Last year, at this time, we were at 75%, so obviously we're higher there. And our basic education, we're trending about 77.5%. Prior year, we're at 74%. That's to be expected with our increase in our general apportionment dollars of a couple $1 million. You'd expect to see more, obviously, being spent in the basic education arena. Overall, we're seeing a trend as far as a decrease in general supply purchases. So this is general supplies and equipment, so basically our consumable materials. We saw an increase in purchase services. A lot of that has to do with like the contract that was brought up earlier, the Soliant contract for the psychologists. Even though we post for it, a lot of times individuals that have the degrees in those fields can make more in the private sector, therefore we end up having to contract and basically get the positions staffed. Therefore we see an increase in the professional services arena. Next slide, so our fund balance, currently we're sitting at about $2.8 million. It's technically about $105,000 low, and that was just because we did our transportation, our mid-month transportation payroll run, which is technically off cycle. We do the run June 15th and we accrue back to May 31st. So we were technically closer to $3 million. Our general fund financial summary on our next slide. So this gives you a higher summary of where we're at from prior year to this year. One of the exciting things with this, for local tax, so the very first line item under revenues, our current year to date we collected just under $4 million. But you can see year-to-date percentage of budget, we've collected 100% of what we had budgeted, 100.29%. That's really good because sometimes you'll see lower collection. You don't necessarily get to collect 100% of what you actually certified for. Sometimes individuals, can't pay their property taxes, and then we'll see a lower percentage there. When you see a percent above 100%, that means individuals who owed back taxes are paying as well. So we're getting to collect on past year's back taxes, which then feed into this year's levy collection as well.
What's kind of the threshold of being right on target? Because I saw last year it was 98.3%. What's kind of that leeway?
So we tend to average it to try to determine sort of ballpark figure of where we would expect to be. A lot of times when we're talking to the professionals that deal with your property tax levy collection rates, a lot of times they'll tell us to average somewhere between the 98 to 99 percentile as far as total collection for that current year. But then you always have individuals that are paying their back taxes as well that will slightly increase that amount. You don't tend to see 100% collection rate. Our current year taxes, so our 2019 taxes, aren't at 100% collected, but we did see a higher increase in past year collection than what we would normally see. Therefore, that's what's throwing us over the 100% threshold. The amount that we're currently missing from the 2019 collection will end up I recertify that amount and I throw it into 2020's collection, and I'll try to recollect next year. A lot of the times it's up to the district as to whether or not they're going to recertify and try to collect for that. I figure, why not? Might as well try, and so I always recertify it and then try to recollect. So, and it worked because we're above 100%. So on a year where we were when we were rolled back, every dollar helps there. So the federal special purpose revenue, so that's the amount sort of halfway down the revenues where you can see we're only at 54%. A good chunk of our federal revenues gets collected during the summer after all of our programs have died down, and I finally have all the information to put in for our grant collection. So that's what we've been working on diligently over the course of the last month to get everything sort of reconciled, rectified, so that I can actually start submitting claims. One of them being due on the 19th of this month, and then another one next month to finalize some of our federal grant claims, and then you'll see that percent increase. Overall, we're still trending positive as far as revenues over expenditures, so that's good. That means we're adding to the fund balance and not eating into our fund balance, which is what we would expect, which is what we would not want to see. The transfers line item, the very last line item under expenditures, that amount we're going to expect to see trued up. Now, general fund, we transfer the money for those 2 loans that got taken out some years back and for our non-voted debt. So I made the final transfer for those ones over into debt service fund for us to make that June 1st payment. So you're going to see that go from that 71% to 100% since those payments were just made.
I don't know if I've asked this question before, but under travel, you had the budgeted of 1,000, and you're
Yeah.
obviously well over that.
Yeah.
But last year, it looked like it was, I don't know if that was budgeted or not. Can we see for the next year that with a legitimate number?
Yeah. So what has happened is in the past, what was being done with travel, it was being coded differently.
Okay.
And so this last year, I've tried to true up our account codes and make sure that all of our travel is legitimately getting coded to what's considered account code 8000, which is travel.
Okay.
And so that we can actually get an accurate reflection for budgeting purposes of what actually needs to be budgeted there. I don't know if you guys have heard much about this account code restructure that the statewide that we're going through to this NCS account code
Yeah,
state.
we haven't talked about it.
Okay.
Super exciting, it sounds like.
Oh,
Yeah, it is.
oh,
Especially for
riveting.
their department.
1,500 account code line items that need to be manually entered. Yeah, so that's one of the tasks that we're on. So what you're seeing as far as how things are being reported right now are going to be different going into next year. We had to start the entire account code restructure in order for me to start the budget under the correct account codes for next year. So we're working on it, but now I'll actually have real data to actually use instead of having those, the travel costs split between a bunch of different accounts.
Okay.
It's actually in the account it needs to be.
Great.
Yeah. So the financial summary by program. Okay, so comp ed. So if you look under the expenditures, the one that I wanted to call out here, so your compensatory education instruction, and you can see we're current year to date is 1.7 million, yet budgeted was 1.5 million. So this also has a big part of our increased enrollment. With our increased enrollment, we received increased categorical dollars that were earmarked for specific populations. So these are our dollars like our LAP dollars that were received that were supposed to be spent on high poverty building schools, our middle school, elementary schools. So as we saw that increased student population, they increased our comp ed allocation, and that has actually really helped our programs this year. It gave us more money it's earmarked, but it's not so tightly earmarked that we have a hard time actually spending it, because they actually give us some leeway on how to spend it, which has been really, really nice as far as being able to improve our compensatory ed programs. So that was the one item there I really wanted to bring forward. And our SPED, Tom's worked really, really hard this year. Obviously, special education is a program that is notorious for operating in the red, just because we need to ensure that we're providing a certain level of services to all of our students. And we've gone back and forth this year, making sure that we're realigning our program to student needs, and then finding the most efficient and cost-saving way to be able to provide these services to students. And so far, we've been able to operate our special services department in the black. We have $11,000 left in the black, but we are in the black.
You're in the black.
We are in the black. And last year we were in the hole by 230,000. So for 1 year, and we had a higher increase in our SPED population this year. So that's
And the
huge.
students with higher needs.
Oh,
So
yep. And we have more students that we're paying for in to be treated elsewhere, which is higher costs here. But we've been able to sort of shore up what we're doing in-house to ensure that all of those special education dollars that are coming in, that we're really putting them to use in the most efficient manner possible. And so we are all of our special education, transportation, and nutrition services as of this moment are in the black. And that's
Nice.
huge.
I hate to ask another question on that.
Uh-huh.
In regards to sped dollars that we're spending versus spend dollars that we're receiving, is it lining up?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
so right now, we've received, or by the year end, because we also include encumbrances, by year end, let's just say nothing else changes. We will have received $11,000 more technically than what the program cost us.
Okay.
So, but that's,
But that's
I-
not having to pull from different,
No,
That's
that's
true-
only
that's-
using
that's
special
true
education
sped dollars.
dollars.
good.
yeah, it is really good. Now, that has been really staying on top of the program, and when certain needs arrive, really looking at how we can best provide those services within the means of what we have already. So instead of immediately going out and purchasing something, do we have something here that can meet those
Perfect.
needs? So that has really been helpful because it helps us helps keep us from continually running into our fund balance to help support everything.
Well,
So
and
that's
it
been
also,
huge.
it also means we're not using any levy dollars to support
Yep.
special ed, which we used to do
We were last
consistently
year. Yeah.
every year.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think it also points out to the efficacy of the many partnerships we've developed
Yep.
with community providers that provide some support for our kids in different ways, and for our staff in coming in and helping us with how do we best meet the needs of some of our most difficult kids. So getting some professional development and support for our staff by partnering with experts who deal with things like extreme behaviors and stuff. So it's a really powerful change to see that we're really, and we're doing it by focusing on kids' needs, not by ignoring them. So I
So
think that's
in
good.
regards to that, and I'm gonna try to make this as clear as I can, because I don't even know if it makes sense to me. But we have students that we have to find outside help for.
Yes.
And just like in our consent agenda with Greatview, we have a contract. How does that work out with, does basically Greatview just pass through the money they get to us, or are we collecting straight from the state for those services?
So
Negotiate.
it's different
Yeah.
for different things. Like Greatview, the kids who come who are non-high, they pass through the dollars. But the kids that if they're coming here for a special education need, then we negotiate that. If they're coming because they're open enrolling, they pass through the dollars. If we're sending a student to one of the partners that we're using, like the one down, what's it called? It has the funniest name. Anyway, down
Northwest Soil and.
in Northwest Soil.
Yeah.
If we're sending a couple of kids down there, we negotiate that with them
Yep.
too. So what is their cost, and then when those kinds of expenses typically are more than what we receive from the state. So then we hopefully keep really good data so that we can report that to the state at year end, and then collect
Safety net.
safety net
So we
dollars.
can be made whole for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we turn in a perfect
Yep.
report.
Yep.
So
And
we have to really
we've
work on
done-
those.
Yes, oh yeah, no. We have worked like, like the Grapeview is a perfect example. Tom, myself, and the individual from Grapeview, we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth regarding, we can truly provide the services needed for this student, but financially, what would that take us? And then negotiating, okay, so if you keep the FTE, you get the student count, they're gonna receive money for it, but
Right.
what do they need to pass on to us in order to make us whole for providing those services? And then talking about the transportation side, so looping Marine in.
Right.
So what's the transportation gonna cost? So we do that, go back and forth, and just make sure that at the end of the day, when everything's said and done, the student's truly receiving the services that they need, and at the same time, Grapeview's getting what they need, and then North Mason gets what we need. So, and it's the same thing with the students that we have at the Madrona House or Northwest Soil. It's looking at, okay, starting with transportation, what's the best, most cost-efficient way to do this? That's when you just started using those van driver positions, because the cost to use a van is much cheaper, and then all the way up. So we, negotiate that contract price for that seat is what they consider it, and we go from there. But it's just making sure that, like, we don't leave any rock unturned. We're always continuously looking for a better way to run the program, and then a more cost-efficient way to run the program as well. And making sure that we're using our resources that we already have available to us. So,
It's nice to see not operating in a vacuum on that one, because it
Yep.
does touch seems like probably every,
Well, and the bottom line is, there's no red on those reports anymore. I really like that.
yeah.
So you're being very diligent.
Yeah, no, and we really are. We've worked as even just cabinet administrator level for months now, even going into looking at what we're going to do next year to make sure that we're going to be able to provide really competitive programs, but be able to fund them in a way that we can still continue to grow as a district, not put ourselves in jeopardy funding-wise, but be able to offer to the community, to the kids, a program that's absolutely the best one that we could possibly offer. And so it's a ton of work, but we've been doing it. So yeah. So so the last page goes into a little bit more detail as far as specific line items. A lot of our red is due to our increases in salary and benefits for both classified and certificated staff at the beginning of the year. That was not fully budgeted for since negotiations had not concluded. So one of the ways that we offset that throughout this year was really monitoring all of our supply and equipment purchases to help offset that deficit. And we were able to do that successfully. The only place revenue-wise we are over in all of our collections revenue-wise right now, except for the federal, which is something that I'll start claiming here over the next 2 months. But other than that, we have the increased revenue collections in all of those arenas. So overall, as far as where we're trending for end of the year fund balance, we'll be over the 8% minimum fund balance capacity. And next month, being July, I will have a request for a general fund budget extension. A big piece of that is due to the increased enrollment, therefore increased revenues, increased expenditures. And then you're going to be hearing about the curriculum adoption. And I worked with Lisa regarding what year do we put that in as far as the actual expense. And we've opted to put a big chunk of that expense in this budget year. It will just be cleaner to do that, but in order to do so, I'm going to wrap it into that, to the budget extension. And then next year, we'll sort of be starting with a fresh start. And plus next year, since it's still technically going to be our lower revenue collection year, we have a budget this year that can absorb that and allow us to start fresh next year. So that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions, comments?
I just want to ask one question. The purchase services,
Mhm.
is that the outside contracts that we have
That's
for
exactly
student
what it is.
special needs? Okay.
Some
Yeah.
of that is, some of that is things like our contract for a site.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
All
So,
right.
yep.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
I'm good?
Thank you.
You're
I'm-
good, go
I'm
rest.
glad you made it through your,
Yeah.
through your thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you guys.
Okay, and the next part is the teaching and learning update. So I'm going to bring Lisa up. And I want to point out that as Tom has been doing good work in special ed in tightening our belt, so to speak, and Ashley is working with all of the administrators and buildings to ensure that we're most efficiently using our resources. Lisa's been hard at work helping us find resources this year. And so she has done some amazing work pulling together a very diverse committee of teachers with very diverse ideas of what our students need best. And getting in and getting their hands dirty and having some tough conversations. And they have arrived at recommendations for an adoption for a new reading or literacy program. And I just wanted to make sure that we recognize the incredible leadership that Lisa displayed this year in getting them to an agreement and having something to bring to you tonight. And so she's going to tell you all about it.
Yeah, and I'm going to give an overview, and if I don't give you enough information, I know you know how to ask questions. So I'm going to back up just a little bit. We started a curriculum cycle about 10 years ago with the goal of replacing curriculum approximately every 7 years. So that, and we've been pretty good about keeping on track with that. So one of the first, when I first came to the district office, one of the very first ones we did was the elementary literacy, which is a very large decision, a very large purchase. And so our committee, there's about 15 people on the committee. We started looking back in October, so we've been meeting for the last about 8 months. We had the people on the committee, they were administrators, they were general ed teachers, ELL teachers, special ed teachers, interventionists, and the instructional coaches. So, and we tried to also vary them between the 2 elementary schools and then by grade level, so that we had a fair representation for all of the different stakeholders that were going to be using it. We started with really making this a group of people who are very knowledgeable about what is a balanced literacy program, what are the standards that need to be covered, and then really making them representative, going back to the buildings and say, what's working with what we currently have? I'm going to say one thing. The materials we're currently having, the frustration with them is that they came way before the Common Core state standards and the Washington state standards. So we've been doing as much work as we can to make them align, but they're not fully aligned. They predated the current standards and the current assessment system. So with a lot of input from our teachers back in the buildings, we started off with about 7 different curriculum we were looking at, narrowed it down because we had a rubric that we were using to look at all this, narrowed it down to the top 3. And then those 3, how that works is that the publishers come in and they tell you more about it, and we then took all of those, took them out to the buildings. Again, we had different ways of gathering information from all the teachers back in the buildings again. And people feel passionately about literacy. I think if you've met elementary teachers before, they have very definite ideas about what they want to use and what they think it works best with kids. And we kept on trying to take the conversation back to who are our kids? Who are our kids that we're trying to make literate human beings here, and what's going to meet our kids, not the kids we wish we had, but the kids that they're ours, that they need this. And what became a little bit difficult about it is that the needs of your youngest learners and your needs of your intermediate learners are a little bit different. And so we ended up with a split adoption. What I mean by that is that we found one set of materials that we thought worked better for our K2 population, and then another one that we thought was a better fit for our 3-5. So I kind of want to explain a little bit about that. Some of the biggest needs that people had as teachers is they wanted more authentic text. The term Basil, the big book that has a little bit of a bunch of stories in it and stuff like that, that's kind of our old series. That's what it was. It was a Basil. And they really felt strongly that our kids need to have books in their hands, full texts, books that are at their levels, so level texts. There need to be a variety of environments that kids are becoming literate. They need to have some whole group instruction, some small group instruction, and some independent work. And so whatever we were looking at needed to meet all of those needs. Okay, but then your youngest learners really need to have a strong program in phonics, phonemic awareness, and so that was the younger kids' needs. Your older kids, they need those things still, but they also need to have more on comprehension and a digital aspect to it, because literacy, as much as we think of literacy of just being books, we know that as kids are getting older, you're expected to read things in a digital platform, and you're assessed in a digital platform. So the Fountas and Pinnell classroom is the one that we chose for our K2. Fountas and Pinnell.
While you're talking, I'll try to bring some of them up.
Okay. Fountas and Pinnell, as researchers, have been around for a very long time, decades. This is the first time they brought it together into a unified system. So it's not pieces put together. We've been using their assessment pieces for a very long time. But the Fountas and Pinnell is created for your youngest learners, that they spend a lot of time working with texts that are at their reading level. So there's progress monitoring that goes through all the way along to say, where is the student reading? How do we get the right text in their hands? And again, it's very much part of trying to have as much time as possible with the kids working with materials at an independent level and then in small group, guided reading groups with a teacher. Okay, less of an emphasis on whole group instruction. Ready Gen, again, go.
Okay, so I know less about curriculum than a kindergartner does.
Okay,
What are the differences between a publisher versus public? I mean, how many publishers are out there, and what are the big differences between them?
oh, okay. Oh, wow. There are hundreds of publishers.
Okay.
And
Like
so
Rand
basically,
McNally and all that other stuff?
you know, and to be honest, there's less now because they've all become huge conglomerates.
Oh,
Okay. And so basically, when you're starting to look at series of materials, you really have to start with the what do we need and what
Okay.
do we want. And that's why when I was saying you can go anywhere from here is a big textbook in a more traditional, most of your instruction is done with large group. We're going to have little worksheets that we're going to do and stuff like that. That is not what people wanted. They wanted, how are we going to get kids engaged in literature, informational text? How do we weave reading, writing, speaking, and listening together so that becomes more of an authentic thing of what people do with text, is to have it be as natural as possible. So that was kind of the first, if you were sieving it down, kind of the first thing was what is going to give the best literacy experience for our students, because basically you want them to love reading and writing by the time, well, forever.
Right.
I mean, that's the goal. You don't
You wanna
ever want to
capture
make this a
the-
barrier. Yeah. So in terms of, that was our first sieve, was let's get something that's going to get our kids to be able to love the process of reading and writing and become better speakers and listeners as well. A lot of conversation around our ELL students as well, because those components, the speaking and listening part of
Right.
it, are essential. And I'm going to do a little side note. We adopted a language acquisition program for our ELL students about 3 years ago. We've made the decision to keep that because language acquisition is a little bit different than literacy. It has some other components to it that our newcomers especially really need to have those aspects to it as well.
So would there be some publishers who would be, more, have a stronger suit in Spanish, Congolese, like our population, versus maybe on the East Coast that has more of an Asian or African?
No. See, language acquisition, language acquisition is the process of what students need to be able to do in order to acquire language regardless of the language they come from. Now, keeping in mind that if you are, for example, part of this is a professional development piece, that if you are teaching in a district where all of the students who are ELL students come from highly affluent families that are from, versus they're coming with no educational background, that's a completely different set of instructional needs that has to happen. And that's why there's no way you can separate curriculum and instruction.
Okay.
And so it's really that, if I may interrupt,
Of
that,
course.
that English language instruction is about learning how to acquire English rather than whatever language you start from, and which is a good thing, because particularly when you learn to acquire language, you learn reading, writing, speaking, and listening, all 4 areas of owning language. And for our kids, many of whom come from the area of Guatemala where they speak Concabal as a first language, that is not a language that has a written component. So the acquisition of their home language has been in a language with only 2 of the 4 components. If they've been able to attend school before they get here, then they've had some exposure probably to Spanish, which does have all 4 areas. So they've had some exposure to learning a language with all 4 aspects of language learning. But if they haven't, then the materials that we use for English language learners are particularly important, because if a student by the time they leave school hasn't had a fully academic experience in using language, they won't. And so that will basically retard their ability to learn language, to use a word that none of us like to use, forever. So that's why our team made this decision that we really had selected powerful English language learning materials that we were not going to set aside because we have the new literacy adoption, because the literacy and English language learning support one another, but they're not the same thing.
Well, and both of these series have components, English language support programs, but they're not the intensity that some of our English language learners need. So that's why we have a variety of things. If you think about it in the same way, when you purchase a curriculum like this, you also purchase additional materials that become the toolkit of your special ed teachers too, because they need to do specially designed instruction. So it's not like you give them a special ed curriculum. It doesn't work that way. They have to specifically know what do their students need, and then what are the variety of materials that we can use that are going to meet the needs of those kids. So we look at, you know, if you're thinking of our multi-tiered systems of support, we look at, okay, the 80%, you know, and then does it have those components of it that are going to help that tier 2 group and then that tier 3 group as well. Okay, I'm going to go to Ready Gen for a second and tell you why we chose Ready Gen for the older kids.
And that's the one I gave you the binder book for.
Okay, so Ready Gen again, authentic text. It still is changing the mode of teaching so that more independent, more small group, less large group instruction, just because we know it's better instruction for our kids to meet the individual needs of students. But it has a much larger digital component to it. So kids are still going to be able to do assessments that are smarter, balanced, because that's a skill they need to know as well. It's still, you can still access texts digitally, because being able to read something on paper and reading something digitally are not exactly the same skills either. So we want to be able to have our students and to grow their skills as they're getting up into those upper elementary grades, so there's not a mismatch between the way they're being assessed and the way they're being taught. Whereas your younger learners, trying to keep them as embedded in physical text is, we thought, more developmentally appropriate.
Does these flow pretty well, being that they're from different entities, from
Yeah.
this to this?
Yeah, and we looked at that. Part of it is that you start with, are they aligned to the standards?
Mhm.
Because if they're aligned to the standards, then you know that it's going to have, there's going to be a flow to it. They're similar enough into the teaching of it, of what they call it a workshop model, so that the actual structure of a student's day are going to be similar enough that that's not going to be a difficult. To be honest, our biggest concerns about, first of all, we checked with other districts, do people do this? You know, and they do quite often. They said other people are running into the same exact issues that you are. Our bigger concern, we had some adult concerns about it. What if you're a teacher and I'm teaching 2nd grade and all of a sudden I'm now teaching 4th grade?
Right.
You know, I'm a specialist. I'm teaching all the grades. Are we going to be able to, or is that going to be a doable thing for an individual to do? We are really going to have to build our teacher leadership. Our instructional coaches can't be the expert on absolutely everything, and so we're going to have some of our primary teachers really take a leadership role in terms of, I'm the one who uses this every day, so I'm going to help other people in my building to be able to do that, and same with our intermediate. So I think we're going into it very wide-eyed about this. But it was trying to get everybody to come to a compromise that it was, because people felt very strongly about all the 3 that were the top 3. So it was, we finally got it down to, no, we have more agreement than we have disagreement on this. But people did some really good work of looking at really trying to take off their how do I like to teach hat versus what do our kids need hat.
That's huge.
It is huge.
Critical thinking.
Will there be a time when they can meet together, maybe as grade level, to have some training?
Yes, as a matter of fact. So the first, you know how we have 3 professional learning days in August. One is a building day and the other 2 are district days. So the 2 district days, one whole day will be with the vendor and their grade level teams across the 2 buildings to become acquainted with the materials. And then the next day, I don't want to forget math completely. So the next day, we're going to have some time in the morning to do some right response basics for some of the behavioral needs of our kids. going back to the basics with math, lesson design for math, and then they'll have the whole rest of that day to work together in their grade level teams. We're having the vendors coming back on that October day as well, because what we found quite often is you're overwhelmed when you first get something. The vendor comes in, they show you everything, and then about 6 weeks later, you're going, where was that part that had to do with, and so bringing it back, and it's going to have to be a multi-year professional development. We've always tried to, as much as possible, to create leadership within the ranks versus bringing a trainer back in over and over again, just because there's a little bit more buy-in when it's one of their own. It's more cost-effective, obviously, but we'll see how it goes. If we don't have the expertise in year 2, we're going to have to revisit.
With buying this, are we set up to where if the publisher says there has to, for whatever reason, has to be an update, that's automatically sent to us where we're not having to repurchase?
Oh, and yeah, we are purchasing what we're purchasing, and so I'll tell you another difference between the two. The Fontes and Pinnell, there's very little digital about it. It comes with hundreds and hundreds of books. So that's the only purchase we're doing is a first-year purchase on there. There are no recurring costs on that one.
One of the things we just did was walk through both elementary buildings with the principals to find all the places they had stuff that really should have been disappeared long ago, well beyond surplus, and emptying out shelves so they have enough space to put all the materials that teachers will have available to them.
Because Ready Gen has a digital component, what you do on this, we did last year with math as well, you buy the digital licensing for it in a 7-year period, so you're paying for the costs up front with that, and they're not going to trade out any of you're buying this particular. I did ask, Pearson is the one who does Ready Gen. They have a newer product, but they went back to the more basal type of one, and the teachers didn't like that one. I said, are you going to phase this out at some point? And they said, no, this is still something that people are buying now. It's because it's about 2 years old.
This is a K-5 adoption?
It's a K-5 adoption.
Okay. So how does this work as they move into the middle school?
So we pay for this one over a 2-year period because it is the most expensive adoption that we do ever.
How much?
It came in under $500,000.
That's
It's
actually
spending.
very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then what we'll be looking at next year is we did this last time, we do 6-12 all at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
So
but we
then
won't pay for
you
that
use-
one until,
Yeah,
not next year, but
So,
like
but then you
fall.
use this as to see
Stepping
how
stone.
that's going to base off this.
Correct.
And then
And we did that-
6-12, it starts to really turn into the English language arts part of it.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
a little bit different definition of what's in the materials.
Well, and it's a little different because you know the whole concept of that you're learning to read and then you're reading to learn. And that's shifted since the Common Core State Standards. That used to be about a grade 3-4. It's moved down to like 2nd grade now. So we're really watching carefully that 2nd, 3rd grade transition so that we still have enough supports for our 3rd and 4th graders if they don't have those learning to read foundational skills.
On the whiteboard, write 2 or 3 words containing a Greek root that you wish to teach.
That's not what they're saying. That's not there right there.
It's,
That's not there.
at the top, they've got cron, dem, ology, and poly.
There you go.
I think this is looking in the right direction.
It's all Greek to some people.
That's right.
Marie, did you have a question?
So, my son's in kindergarten, so, and one of the things that he had kindergarten developers is figured out how to put homework on his internet. But I hear you saying that like the 3 to 5 component has a lot of digital, and the K to 2 doesn't have a lot of digital.
It has a lot of books.
But one of the things that I enjoy about the digital aspect of ESPN as a parent is I get to sit there with the kid and it moves at his pace and it's a little faster than turning in a local movie or we can move at a faster pace over the weekend versus this is the book we were given
what kind of
For those kids
home
that-
engagement projects that
for
parents are
home
giving.
engagement, because my child is maybe, moves at one pace and this child moves at this pace, so something to be able to continue, because we do a lot of it
through the building is that our teachers and principals were looking at, okay, we have all these really cool books, storybooks and stuff on these shelves that aren't current anymore and that our library maybe isn't using, but we have whole sets. And so they're looking at creating take-home bags rather than just one book for weekends and things like that for kids who need that.
The other thing is I've been talking mostly about reading, which is not really fair at all, because if you think about it, a lot of kind of projects that they'll be doing with writing and all of that will still be coming along as well. It's just, when you look at even programs that are out there, the ones for math tend to be a little bit more effective than the kinds of reading or writing activities that we do.
reading one too.
It's free, still there.
Well, and ST Math wasn't available for all the grades. Because I know that my kid was doing it for like a couple grades, and then I called in and was like, why aren't we doing that this year? And they're like, oh, because we could only afford for this side, to this much, and then we went this way with
Right.
this to, save money and whatever.
We're
so.
trying to,
I guess what I was trying to
Hey, guys, we can have your private, those questions for
The-
Lisa.
I've sent out to the various principals about the various apps that are
Tools.
available, digital apps that are available, because ST Math has a very, very, this has nothing to do with the literacy adoption, but it has a very specific way it's supposed to be being used, and if it's not, then it's probably not the best,
Yeah.
And there are a lot of other that we can use more flexibly, so.
that are not
I
$30
think
a
the
license.
biggest thing is just to communicate it,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
sort of changes. I mean, an example I use, and I know it's an extreme, and everyone had that issue when the new math came out, and all of a sudden,
Which new math?
the columns.
Oh, yeah.
And my kids were learning math differently than I learned math, and what was wrong with the old way? But having, no, I'm going to pontificate here. We can get a room full of people when we have a basketball issue, but when a curriculum issue is, it's crickets.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Sorry.
no, I'm not really sorry about that comment.
I know.
The communicating when these changes are from one to another, especially as parents maybe get that buy-in on something, and all of a sudden, well, we're phasing out of that. Just communicate that and have those. I don't know how it works at conferences or even open houses. Just having these things out to show this is what we're going to be doing. It's going to be different than what we've done before. Especially if you have parents that have kids that have a fairly good-sized age gap.
Mm-hmm.
But communication. Communicate.
You're right. And we won't go into a curriculum. I'm probably the only person who really thinks curriculum is really an exciting thing to talk
Well,
about.
this is
but-
exciting to me. I
Yeah,
mean,
but when we start getting into digital content,
Mhm.
it gets really messy because people can pull up whatever they want to, and there
Right.
is an approval process of what we're using. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that is also one of the things that Lisa and the principals have been working really hard on is there are some things that are approved and there are other things our teachers are using without approval and they need to stop using those. And
And there
if-
needs to be-
unless they go through the process, and if they go through the process and meet our standards, and especially when they're free, that's great. But we're working hard. That's this transition to a digital world that we're all going through is messy for schools in lots of different ways, not just in people and kids and the things that they can
Right.
do to each other, but in also how do we provide access to learning using different kinds of materials.
And some things don't change. Writers can combine multiple writing styles and voices in the same book. This is called Essential Questions and Big Ideas. Big, oval in the middle. How do writers use literary language to enliven their writing? Arrow. Metaphor and simile help make complex or abstract ideas clearer to readers. And then this wonderful sentence at the bottom. Rhyming and free verse poetry allow writers to tell stories in memorable and beautiful ways. I'd buy the whole package.
From the professor.
Well, I
of
really
rhetoric.
appreciate, I know that large groups are not easy to herd into any particular direction, so I'm sure that was a big job for you, and to have landed on these two, I think is really great, and I appreciate all your work.
Thank you.
And I would love to have, like, maybe mid-year, an update on how it's
Absolutely.
rolling out.
I'll make a little nod back there to Denise, and she and Lisa can schedule that for a mid-year
Cool.
board meeting right now.
That'd be cool.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, guys. Thanks,
Do we
Lisa.
take this with us, or we have to?
No,
give it
no,
back?
you have to leave
You have
those
to give that
here.
No, you can't take this.
We need to have these in
For the kids.
so other people can look at them that are parents and community
Watch out for
members.
your boxes when we leave. John will be
Nice
running
try.
out to his car. Yeah, yeah.
Once we've adopted, if the adoption companies don't want these back, then you can ask that question again.
Okay, well,
At your
anytime
mid-year review.
I can ask that question, I certainly should. And if I can hold up the works in any way by taking it home, then
I'm surprised on how fascinated I was by that.
Oh, it's fascinating. I love it.
The adoption process is really interesting. Before I was involved in doing that in school, and even early on as a teacher, I just wanted, just give me materials and I'll figure out how to use them. But once you go through the process and you really start using a rubric to look at the materials and ask the questions, so they're looking at things like, not only does it teach all the standards, but is there a balance of people represented in the pictures in the materials that we
bias
look? So
factor.
are our kids seeing people that look like them in the materials? So that's one of the questions when we ask our kids over and over in the EES surveys that we're doing. They don't report that they see themselves in the materials very well right now. So that we're really paying attention to those kind of bias things, and those are all part of how they evaluate. So it's a very intense process, and
Has
I
it-
really appreciate the work Lisa did on that.
Has it always been that way? I mean, has it
The
even
bias thing came in about 10 years ago.
not the bias, but
Oh.
adopting curriculum through the? Has it always been a fairly intensive process?
Yeah, it has been. And it used to be that for reading, you always had a basal, a reading book, and a teacher manual, and that's about what you were buying back in the day, or for science or whatever. But now, publishers are including those supplementary, like the red binder that I put in front of
This one.
Yeah.
Laura, is some of the intervention supports for kids who aren't getting it in that basic 80%. So they're including, you don't, as a teacher, you're still going to have to come up and make you're going to have to make a lot of decisions, and you might have to still design stuff that isn't in the materials. But the tools that are available to you, because the publishers have asked so many teachers and put so much thinking into it, are so much richer that it's almost an easier process, I think, than it used to be, Laura, because
yeah.
there's the stuff you want to find there that you can't find, so then you sit in the room and instead argue
Searching
about
for
which
it.
one is the one that's going to be the
Yeah.
least work, or that's going to meet the most kids' needs. Becomes a much easier question to answer, because they all do a much better job.
I always felt when I was in school they just picked a book and gave it to
I'm
us.
excited. I'm
Well, and it
excited-
might have depended.
I'm excited to hear this stuff, particularly the bit, and it's been true of my experience here as well in observing classes, the attention given to remedial work, to knowing how there's a really diagnostic aspect to this for teachers as I just glance at it. Okay, so-and-so's having problems, what do you do? And my experience has been school is actively seeking help and not receiving it.
Well, and I think you just hit on a really important distinction that has changed in the last several years, and that is we used to say, okay, we're going to teach everybody, and then we'll figure out who doesn't get it,
Right.
and then we'll remediate them. And because obviously there's something wrong with them because they didn't get it. Instead of maybe I didn't teach things in the way that everybody could get it, or some of the other ways you could look at things. But now, and our publishers are on board with this too, now in classrooms and when they're publishing materials and all the way through, people are going, okay, we know about 80% are going to get it because we put something in front of them. But how are we going to intervene to make sure more of them get that
Here,
at
here.
this level 2 or the level 3, so that eventually all of them get it, but without having already had to fail miserably over and over again.
Right.
So that, not that failing is bad. Failing is good in life. That's how you learn and that's how you grow. But how do we provide kids who are our learners and scaffolding to learn what they need to learn without being so discouraged that they stop.
Failing is one thing, having a soft spot to land is another.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very encouraging. If anybody wants an example of how education is better than it was in the old days, this is your example. I mean, I really believe it, because I sat in on Ms. Olson's class in algebra, and I saw what she did, saw what she does, and a level of instruction I never experienced.
I think actually listening to the student during the years that they're in school from elementary all the way up to 12th grade, and then at the end, and actually hearing what they're saying, I think has become a new culture from when I was in school till now, that I see and hear. That I think North Mason is doing an amazing job at that, and sitting and having the round tables, and we're absorbing it, actually absorbing it and talking about it, and we make our decisions on what they say, and it's not just teachers going, this is what I think they're feeling and whatever. I'm very close to my kid, and I live my way that I direct him through what he's saying to me and how we work together. So I think that everybody here is doing a really good job at that.
I like what she said, the kids that we have, not the kids that we want.
Right.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just have to add another, look at one of those first ones called Interactive Read Aloud. And if I wanted to make one difference between our education today and education either in the time of the Greeks or in the time of the 19th century, it would be oral literature, knowing how to read aloud.
That was the hardest
And
part
I've
for me.
found kids in university, their senior year, and I ask them to read something from a speech.
Yeah.
The effective liberty is that people may do what they choose. We ought to see what it will please them to do before we risk congratulations, which may soon be turned to complaints. A sentence they do not know how to read. Granted, it's an 18th century sentence, but there are long sentences in the Declaration of Independence. The point is, when you understand how to read a thing aloud, you actually understand a dimension of what it means.
And how to
I
deliver
think getting the words resurrected off the page, into the mouth, out to others, I think that's important. It's too bad we stop at the lower grades.
All right.
Capital projects?
So, capital projects, as you kind of know from what we talked about earlier, we are expecting to approve a bid for the completion of the stadium project, which will complete our 2013 round of improvements. One of the reasons that Ashley is presenting the budget revision and we have the additional revenue, in addition to helping to pay for all of the materials, is so that we can, and that transfer from one budget to the capital projects, is we are planning a new roof on Sand Hill Elementary School. Probably will, because of scheduling, probably will happen during spring break, so it can happen when there are no kids around, but we're going to have it cleaned and looking really pretty when school starts.
That's a pretty tight timeline.
Yeah.
To get, well,
roof?
yeah, they can do it.
Okay.
Well,
Well, if they start on the Saturday to the Sunday, the 10-day there, they can do it.
Okay.
That's what they tell us.
they had a roof
Watch
on
and
my house
learn.
in a day and a half. I think they could probably do that in
That's
10 days, 9
30,000
days.
square feet.
So anyway, that's what we're thinking
Okay.
at this point in time. Those are the big things that are happening in capital projects. The next month when we meet, I will be able to take you over into a brand new clinic that all our partners have completely moved into, and you can see how beautiful that will be to support students and staff and their the medical needs during the coming year. So that's very, very exciting. Our team has done an amazing job during that renovation, so I'll be able to point out all the things that our own employees did and made decisions about and helped us get done. So it's pretty awesome. So we're looking forward to that. So, and then Feller, Joan and I met surveyors down last week at Feller. They needed to survey the final parking lot that we took possession of from the bank, so that had never been effectively surveyed, and if that's going to be part of the transfer, that had to be done.
Okay.
So they did that last week, so that was, as far as I understand, the last piece that our attorney needed to have to be able to put together final information to work with Fish and Wildlife and to bring a package to the board. So I look forward to having the next steps happen soon.
Cool.
Okay.
Good, so I can tell, I've got a constituent that asks about this frequently. So I can say that we are in the final processes of putting, our lawyers in the final process of putting together a package for us to consider.
Right.
All right, so Leanna, you have the board letter for June. Number 9, assurance of organizational performance and policy review. And
Yeah, I've got it.
we're going into monitoring reports. And this month we have E4, school engagement, with the administration's response to that report or that policy.
Well,
And I
Mr.
would-
Chairman, I move that we accept the assurance of organizational performance and policy review as given. I thought the monitoring response was quite detailed.
I'll accept a motion to accept the monitoring report
I move that we accept the monitoring report.
and finding the, I'm sorry, we have to
Yeah,
amend it.
right, sorry. To find the superintendent's performance compliant with our goals for the monitoring, with the monitoring report.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I had brought this up to the superintendent earlier. I do have some training, my old training from school psychology, concerns about the data that was presented in the tables. I don't feel, to me, I'm not comfortable enough in accepting that data for what it partly says. It's just a matter of comfort level. She assured me that perhaps the people that conducted the studies there to create this data would have an answer for the questions that I had. But basically, I'm looking at, when you have comparing a result from one year to the next year, there's nothing reporting to us that reports to us as who we're talking about. And we know that kids move, that we have, this might be cohort data, it might not be cohort data, that's not clear. And those are the kinds of questions that make me uncomfortable in understanding the data. The rest of the stuff I'm all right with, and I don't have any problems with actually what they're trying to say, because I don't have a problem with that. I think we're really doing the job of what the superintendent is or that what we're trying to have the superintendent do for the kids here. I'm just concerned about what the data is telling us. I don't think it's telling us enough for me to be happy. That's all.
I understand what you're saying. For me, when I read that data, to me, I look at it, maybe it's from just a higher elevation of culture, of not necessarily about cohort, not necessarily about grade, kid to kid to kid, but what's the culture of the school? Are the schools promoting a culture or feeding the culture of I can do, basically these questions, and some areas to improve on, for instance, the setbacks don't discourage me. Now, obviously, that's individual centric, I think, but if we're looking at the gains that we made, that's one man. I had LASIK at one time. I don't know if you know this, but 1%, so that's a positive. But as a culture of the school, that this is all part of the learning, the social emotional learning that.
Yeah, if I were to read the data as is, towards what you brought up, I would say, well, the culture isn't changing.
Okay.
1%, 4% isn't very much, and those are the things that are suspect to me.
Okay.
And suspect is too strong a word. That they don't tell me enough.
Okay.
And it's too small of a percentage to say very much anyway. Nevertheless, so I look at this and I see, well, okay, we're not seeing any major changes, really up or down, although if there's a trend, it's slightly up, except you can't really rely on that because the data isn't clear as to what it means. That's all.
Okay.
How many students participate in that?
Just under 600 students across the district participated this year. It's a little lower than the previous year.
We do it just high school or K-12?
Middle elementary through high
Okay.
school.
Okay.
So all of the buildings are working on how they get more kids engaged in more teachers and more parents in answering questions. But I brought that up when we had the president and vice president of the Center for Educational Excellence here to talk about these materials and about the individual building results with our principals last week. And they didn't feel that the change in numbers was a concern. They felt that we still had very, very positive or effective data. I can get the answers specific to art-specific questions, and I will do that. One of the things that they pointed out that isn't reflected in what I put in this report, because it didn't really fit what I was trying to show you that the kids had said, but an anomaly in our district, something of which to be extremely proud, was the comparison of our students' responses on the questions related to how they feel safe or don't feel safe at school. Students in North Mason feel significantly safer at their school than kids across the state and across the nation who take these surveys. So that was really exciting. He said that kind of as a throwaway comment at the end. So they are going to be pointing that out when they do some presentations at the principals conference in next week in Spokane. There are things we need to work on too. This is just student responses. We're looking at staff responses, parent responses, and probably I will use different pieces in some of the other reports during the year so to get you more familiar with what was in this report. And of course, you can always see the whole thing, but I think looking at little pieces at a time lets you think and ask questions, then come back to it again and again. We're finding that's more effective with the principals too, so that they'll actually use the data to make impacts on what they're doing. So I understand what Art's saying. It's hard because this isn't cohort data. This is whoever chooses to answer the questions each year. And there will be some overlap and there will be some different kids. There will be kids who moved away. That's part of why I was concerned about the changes in how many responses we got. But it does tell us what the kids who answered the questions are feeling about our schools. And I think those are important things. And in this particular report, when we're talking about how students are engaged in schools, I was struggling because for the last few years as I've done this report, I've used data that tells you, well, this many kids are playing sports and this many kids are in choir, and it doesn't tell you that those might all be the same 50 kids over and over in multiple sports and choir and everything. And so it doesn't tell me how kids in our schools overall are feeling. So I feel like this is, or as far as being engaged in our schools and in our learning, I think this does a little bit better job in that. I'm certainly can look and will keep looking for better ways to provide you a report. But that was why I made this decision with using these data pieces. And there are hundreds of different questions and responses, and I kept going back and forth between the CEE report and E4, the board's charge here, to make sure that I was finding ways to respond to exactly what you were asking happens here with the are we engaging in critical thinking? Are we engaging in work skills? And so that's why in the work one, there are all sorts of things you can pick. But when you look at the 21st century employability skills, I think these few that I picked out, and they aren't the ones necessarily that we rated the highest on, but I think they're very important employability
But those would be my
skills.
top three.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was picking out skills that they give the characteristics for, those would be probably my top three that I would look at.
Right.
How is the survey given? Is it one day or
Paper or like electronically?
one day
It's been, it can be in one day, but we've done it over multiple days to get to make sure everybody has a chance to respond.
Because I guess that's the other thing too, to look at it, Art, is it's almost like this test results. I mean, it's a snapshot.
It is just
You know,
a
it's
one-time shot.
one piece of the whole data set that we can use to go forward.
Yeah, it's just like if for the academics I brought in only the SBA results, you'd get that and it tells you something. This tells you something.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice when such data as we do have confirms so strongly what Laura and I and others at this table have seen from the students saying about safety. I mean, I've pressed that question several times with several groups, and it always comes out positive.
Well, one thing I'd like to come back to too, Art pointed out that these percentages aren't very big, and I agree. I'd like to see bigger changes from year to year. But one of the things that the gentleman from CEE pointed out to us too is that when you make as many big changes as we've made, particularly in the last year with our commitment to multi-tiered systems of support, that you have an implementation slump.
Yeah.
So that you can even see very large dips in the kinds of things that we're asking, so that we would expect in the next couple years to see a much higher
Come up with a
improvement,
J-curve.
because we kind of have that, you know, where you do the storming, then norming, and then forming growth curve. So we're in the beginning of that, and
You
so
know,
it is
when-
what it is.
When we had our, I'm going to call it the exit conference with the seniors, one of the things that they brought up was how it would be better if students were invited to join in to clubs rather than left to their own, because many students feel like they just can't.
They can't-
get in there. They're shy or whatever. And the comment was that there's over 200 kids in DECA, because their advisor goes into the lunchroom and recruits. And so they just, sure, we'll go do it.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, reaching out to kids that are just sort of hesitant to jump up and find a group to associate with, I think is a great thing too. And even for students to invite students. Just a comment. I call for a question.
All right. All those in favor of accepting the monitoring report and finding the superintendent meeting the policy or interpreting the policy to satisfaction? Is that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
Okay.
Into adjournment. Go to the order comments and start with you. Do you have any comments for the good of the order?
No, it's just exciting to get to where we are at the end of the year. We had an interesting but very positive graduation experience. All of the schools have exciting things going on for kids in the last couple of weeks, today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And I'm most excited that, in a way, that we experienced a week-long snow outage, because we have an opportunity to do some amazing professional development on Thursday and Friday this week with our staff that is just going to set up next year to just start with a bang. And I'm
Oh,
very
that's
excited
awesome.
for our kids and our staff for that reason.
That is awesome.
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
I would just like to say it's nice to, once we have this year done, it's nice to see we don't have the turnover that we've had in the past with teachers. And I just want to reiterate that the exit meeting we had, it was, to me, that it reinforces that, you know, even though the multi-tier system of support is fairly new, I think we already have a good base in getting that down, and I'm excited about the new leadership at the middle school. And I'm excited to see what is happening in our elementary schools. And I think a lot of good things are happening. And like some of those seniors said, we wish the people who weren't inside the buildings knew the true stuff that were going on. So that's paraphrasing.
Here, I would say that's one of the, I end this year with a real positive feeling that, because of reasons we've already rehearsed, that we're moving in the right direction. And it's good to know that, and I hope we all realize we have a potential mission here, because most people don't think this, public schools equal failing. That's untrue. There are aspects of it that may be true here and there in special circumstances, and nobody's good at everything. But having said that, I think the general stereotype is way overblown, and I try never to miss an opportunity to correct people when I hear them, in a diplomatic way.
Of course.
Just a comment, I'm so vain, I wanted to read my board letter after I published it after it was on, and it took me a while even to find it. So if it were easier somehow to get to our board letters, and they were given a little more publicity on our page, it seems to me these are letters sent to dearest him who is alas away. And if we could get more people reading them, I think that would be great. I also wanted to say, what I missed saying the first time, I agree about the gentleman that gave the tremendous speech. Eloquence comes in many forms. I thought the lady who gave the first speech gave one of the most substantive graduate speeches I've ever heard from this high school. And I don't hear as well as I once did, and I would love to have a copy, because I think that speech was very good. It sounded like she had received an education, was thoughtful and reflective. If the public doesn't, the public didn't like the Gettysburg Address either. So I would like to get a copy of that speech and read it for myself. I thought, and I think she deserves special commendation.
Yeah, maybe not.
Art?
One short thing and one less short thing. The short thing is, the internet is now working at Camp Lyle McLeod in a proper way, so I can actually do emails with the school computer.
It
and
only
stuff.
took your whole career there.
Just about. They fixed it a week and a half or so ago, and I had to wait for 3 days before I would trust that it was going to stick, and it's been sticking since then. Wow. Anyway, I'm pleased about that. So that's a short thing. The other one, which is really short too, I would love to see us, our school district, support, sponsor, or whatever it is, a charter school.
The what?
Oh, what?
A charter school for us. The way it was set up by the guy who first created it. I would love to see that, but that's enough. I think that lady right there has the stuff to be able to do something like that.
Well, that's
I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's good.
Maybe
I
that's
agree
something we can discuss
I
at another
agree that the
time.
lady has asked us to do it. My question is, does it need to be done?
Perhaps not, but, you know, I'm sure you all know how the charter school thing was created.
Yeah.
It's morphed into totally something different, but how he set it up was, it was something for schools to do. Within our school district, within our bailiwick, to create a charter school that would not have to be constrained by the laws, the rules, and stuff like that, so that we could innovate and figure out what works for us, and that potentially some of these things are transferable. They could be transferable to others too, but it's not a charter school in the sense of trying to compete. This would be a charter school for innovation, for, well, anyway, that's enough.
That could be.
Just wanted to throw the idea out.
A future discussion.
Yeah.
I think it shows some diversity here, of something that you're passionate about, and you're passionate about one of the speeches that were given, and I was passionate about one of the other speeches, so I loved hearing everybody's different things today. So.
All right, next school board meeting will be held here July 18th, 2019, 6:30 p.m. And we're going to move into closed session for 30 minutes to discuss strategy or position to be taken during the course of collective bargaining or review proposals made in negotiations. There may be action as a result of this discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, the board
Oh.
self-assessment, do you want to do that
Okay.
first?
Well,
I'll
I-
hit it on when we come back.
I did
Okay.
it. Yeah, we'll do it when we come
Yeah,
back.
sorry, I went right over it.
Nobody's here.